Great. Thank you, Catherine. I'm Rick Weston, Chair of the CHS TAG. Welcome all, and I call the meeting to order. I just a few housekeeping matters. Ask everyone to keep muted unless you are speaking. Raise hands in order to get into the queue. We don't use the chat function for public comment. We do have, of course, opportunity for public comment later in the meeting. Let's see. We've got a couple people here from Efficiency Vermont and the DPS who will be assisting us today. Let's see, Matthew for one. Is that correct? Matthew, yep. Baker Poole. And Emily, who else from Efficiency Vermont will be joining us?
Yeah, we have Dave Westman, who will be participating in the credit ownership breakout group. And then we also have Adam Sherman participating in the bioenergy breakout group.
Right. And we've got Ben Plotzker from EVT. And
thanks, Rick.
We're good. I think we're good here. Okay. Catherine, do you have anything to add? Have I missed anything?
No, we're good to start.
Okay. Well, welcome all. And let's start with the next item on the agenda, which is the review and approval of the April 4th meeting minutes. Did folks had a chance to review them? We can discuss any amendments that might be needed, and then take a motion to approve. Any thoughts? Okay. Would someone like to move to approve them if there's no objection?
I'll move to approve them.
I will move their approval. This is Ken.
Second.
Right. Second was whom? Was who, rather?
Matthew Baker Poole, sitting in for TJ Poor from the Department of Public Service.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay. All in favor, signify by raising your hand either physically or through the hand function. I think we're good. See, there you go. Jared is here. Good, thank you. All opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved.
I'll abstain because I wasn't present.
That's fine, but yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, our next item. I'll turn to Deirdre for updates from the PUC.
Okay.
Morris, thank you.
Sure. So the two things on there. So we presented to the commissioners the TAG's view on filling the vacant seat, and they're amenable to that. So we'll be putting out a solicitation to invite potential members to apply. I'll notify you all when that solicitation goes out, and ask that you forward to your network or anybody that you think has the appropriate expertise and experience to fill that seat. I will mention that it's not, the commission sees this as not a requirement to fill this seat. So depending on the applicants that we get, we're not going to fill it just to fill it, but really want to see that expertise that's envisioned in statute in that description to be filled. And so that's the status on that. So that's moving. On opinion dynamics, there's not a whole lot to share there's no work product yet for this group to react to. They're finalizing their measure list, I think this week. So that should be shared with you all pretty soon. And they're on schedule to deliver the measure structure template that is on their timeline for May 3rd. So that won't be in time for your next meeting on the 2nd, but for the following. For general kind of PUC status updates, so the commission approved kind of a high-level work plan yesterday, so we'll be issuing it in a few days. As a heads up, I think this was expected, but it's very, very different than the December schedule that was put out initially, where we had all those discrete tasks separated out and had public process around each of them. So we listened to the feedback that didn't work. And this really aims to group like items and have far fewer requests for input. And this is just a reminder, this is a public participation work plan and affects this group, of course, but is not the same as this group's work plan, which we'll get into a little bit in the next agenda item. So that is coming up in the next few days. And then S305, which is the housekeeping bill that was combined with the clean heat standard changes with the DDA appointment date. A new substantive thing that was added in this week was changing the fuel dealer registration date from January 31st or whatever the commission would decide it to be in future years to June 30th. The bill was referred to the Committee on Ways and Means yesterday, so I'll continue to give updates on that bill as it moves. And I think that's about it. Are there questions on those set of updates?
Not seeing any
If
hands.
if I can, if they change the registration date, does that change, when they report their fuel sales, do they still use the calendar year? So when let's say we're in 2026, and they're filing in July 1st, June 30th of 2026, are they reporting the 2025 fuel sales?
Actually, yeah, Matt, if you have an answer for that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I advocated for the changing of the date. I have since this was first proposed back in 2021 to not put the registration date during the busiest month of the year for heating fuel dealers. I failed 5 times and I succeeded on the 6th. I may fail again because the Senate might rip it out in committee of conference. Things happen. But no, the intention was clearly to provide a month in which wasn't our busiest season in order to fill out the paperwork for the prior year. So the year doesn't change the reporting requirement, just the date it's due. So rather than 31 days after, it's now 6 months.
So it is then going to be the reporting for the calendar year.
That's right.
Okay.
I would like to change that. I'd like to change a lot of things. There's so much I have
Yeah.
capacity to do or ability to do.
Okay.
Any other questions for Deirdre? Thanks, Deirdre. Helpful updates. And I think you're still on for our next slot here.
Okay, so the second page in the group's meeting materials was a really nice flow chart, swim chart that Ben Blasky from the department helped visualize. So the exercise here is that we really wanted to put the 10 tasks that are required in statute for this group to address, in addition to, the few things that the commission had on the December schedule where we anticipate asking this group about. Visualize those in terms of sequence and what we think this group needs to work on those. I don't know how many things are on there, maybe 14 things or so, maybe a few more. So I think there's still a few changes to be made in this swim chart, but this was really meant to kind of inspire some reactions if anyone thinks that this group might need very specific things. For instance, Brian, I'd be curious if that tag task, coordination with A&R to ensure GHG reductions achieved in another sector through the implementation of the CHS are not double counted inventory. Where that might fit in this sequence of things. So that was kind of the intention, is to connect the things that we are almost certain are dependent on opinion dynamics work. Basically whether this group can start to work on things once we have, the early measure deliverable, and then maybe not a few other things, not until a draft technical reference manual is expected, which is not until the end of August, which is why there's a lot of stuff in September and October. So that was the intention, is just to give this group a sense of what's upcoming, and kind of solicit any feedback where people feel that something might be missing in terms of what you all need to work on something, or that kind of thing. So I would say the caveat, there's a few things that still need to be moved around, but in general, this is what we envision this group to work on and when.
So we're not showing it because it's probably not readable, even as we shared our screens.
That's what I was thinking. I think it's I'd have to zoom in too much for it not to.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that everybody can open this up on your own screens, take it or have printed it out in a way that you can read it. And the intention, again, is for this to help us think about, make sure that we're sort of tracking progress, as well as understanding the dependencies of where we need information in order to accomplish certain tasks. In our next session, we'll talk about, hopefully this will help inform a discussion about whether or not we need additional breakout groups in order to make sure that we're staying on schedule and getting work started. But I guess the question for the group is, having reviewed it, do you have any questions about what's in here and how it is actually slotted into the timeframes? Or do you have any suggestions about something that's missing? This is, I think, Emily, if it's fair to say, a pretty organic document that, we can change as we move through the process. So don't feel like this is fixed in stone. Anybody want to raise any questions or comments?
Well, this is Rick. I'll just start by thanking TJ, Matthew, Ben, the department, and Deirdre for doing this. I find it very helpful to, see spatially the relationships amongst these activities. I do think that what we see coming up in May might inform our discussion about additional work groups we might need. But I look forward to hearing from others on this point.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and transition into that conversation then about the breakout groups.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Right now we've got 3 breakout groups, and today only 2 of them will be meeting, which is fine. We have in front of us, as you can see, in May. I'm looking at the flow chart and just looking at May, and wondering if there's some additional work that we might want to be doing in another breakout group. The process for setting declining intensity of liquid and gas clean heat measures, is that something that the biofuels group is sort of inherently taking up, or should we form another group to do so? Any thoughts on that?
So I kind of, characterize that as a pacing question because it's a process. So in statute, it's pretty prescriptive of when carbon intensity values need to decline by, I think, 2025 and 2030. But this is really asking what the process should be for deciding how those values should decline in between years. So, and again, a lot of this process at the beginning is recognizing that we have very little time once there's potential study data and we have a little bit more concrete values to work with. So that's the reasoning for putting this process up front. is to really understand what inputs are needed to decide when those carbon intensity values or what shape that should take, that that trajectory of carbon intensity values in between years that are not outlined in statute. So just wanted to mention that. I think it's a pacing thing, but if others have a different view or some suggestions on that, that would certainly be welcome.
Ken?
Yeah, that whole part of the statute confuses me a little bit because well, I'll focus on biodiesel as a particular. It's confusing to me. The amount of biodiesel that's sold is going to lead to a number of credits, and the determination of how many credits is going to be based a large part on its carbon intensity. So, so this requirement in the statute that carbon intensity also needs to go down. I mean, I kind of understand it, but it's not, and I'm not saying it's double counting, but I don't, I need to really understand how those credits are going to be calculated first, which is what we will be talking about in our group. You know, is it the difference in carbon intensity between pure fuel oil and a renewable or biodiesel product, that then becomes the determination of the credits. And then, yeah, I suppose we could ask, okay, so, you know, hopefully for most of the renewable and biodiesel sources at this point are certainly below the 80 figure. And many of them are in the 50 to 60 depending upon which source you use. But I need to have some policy people, the folks that help draft this legislation, and express what they intended. I mean, why? Yeah, I may not have been clarifying there. I'm just voicing my own confusion. I mean, we have to determine the number of credits that happens when you sell biodiesel, and that's going to be very important. Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't help. Just
Emily? Levin?
Yeah, sorry to be off camera. I'm traveling today. But can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, this is one of those where, you know, the original schedule, the DPS schedule, excuse me, the PUC schedule separated out like a process step and then the actual setting of the thing step, and in a way that I'm not really sure there's that much to discuss in terms of the process in the absence of seeing actual data on how the actual biofuels are, like what is the current carbon intensity of the current biofuels available in Vermont, and then what would be the future carbon intensity of future fuels that we anticipate would be available. And then once we like see those trajectories, we could have a conversation about a reasonable pace of decline. But I'm having a hard time understanding like what we could really accomplish by having that conversation theoretically. And I guess while I'm on the line, I would say that, you know, I spent some time kind of reviewing the flow chart and the tasks and all of that over the weekend. And it really, to me, underscores that the highest priority activity really of the entire tag that is possible to do at this point before we have all the various technical consultant and potential study consultant analyses available is proposing the life cycle analysis methodology for biofuels, including wood. And like, you know, are we just using GREET? Is there an adaptation of GREET? Like, it looks like the PUC is looking to the tag to make an initial recommendation. You know, we need to align with the consultants and make sure we're using common assumptions with them. So hopefully they can provide some input as well. But to me, that task really rises to the very top of the priority list in terms of what we can actually usefully accomplish now and isn't totally dependent on waiting for recommendations and deliverables from the consultants. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I think that to me is a higher priority than tackling this carbon intensity issue. I think once we straighten out what the actual life cycle analysis methodology is, a lot of these other steps will flow from that. And I will note, I say that as not a member of the biofuels subgroup, but one who's very interested in what that subgroup will develop.
Ken, curious about as the point person for the bioenergy group, is that something that resonates with you?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that, but it's you're right, but that is in terms of establishing the credit value, the life cycle analysis for establishing credit value. But I think I agree with Emily, this sort of determining the threshold quality of a source biofuel, I don't think we're going there. We got enough other work to do.
Floyd, please.
Yeah, I don't know if this goes to Ken's earlier question. I'm not sure I fully understand it with respect to how credits are calculated, but I would be happy in maybe the next meeting to do a really brief presentation on how that calculation is done on the West Coast in the low carbon fuel programs, and see if that helps with folks' understanding of how that works. I'm happy to do that if that would be useful for the group.
Well, for clarity, so it would be a presentation on the California Low Carbon Fuel Program methodology to just complete that sentence for me.
To show how declining CI values translate into credits. I think that's what I got from Ken's question. But if you want to be a little more specific on the question, maybe that'll help me focus on what to share with the group. I mean, we can take this offline if that helps.
Yeah, I think we should do this in our group.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do like the idea of you of seeing or having a presentation on what is happening in California. I like that idea, and we'll certainly keep that in mind when we put the agenda together, and obviously be in touch with.
Yeah, sorry, this is Emily again. I agree. I think that would be very helpful. And I guess I also, just following on my prior comment, want to observe that I think the biofuel subgroup has by far the most work to do. So that's just an observation that I don't think there's like kind of equal tasks assigned. Some of the other groups have sort of small things they can respond to, and PUC or DPS has initially drafted a proposal that the group can review, and there are bits to do, but I just think this biofuels piece is really large and important, and one of the few things we can really dig into up front. And therefore I don't know, I'm not sure we want to just send everyone else off into other subgroups the entire time. We might want to think about how we might give a little extra weight to that activity across the entire tag.
Matthew?
I'll just comment. Thanks for that offer, Floyd. I think it would also be really helpful to do a single example of the actual calculation for feedstocks, pathways, etc., just so people have a context for how the carbon intensities are calculated. But we can discuss that in the subgroup.
Yeah, and I think that would be helpful given all of the different pathways and different types of fuels that we're talking about, because there are some nuances there that folks should be aware
of. Brian?
I'm gonna try and be brief here. Yeah, I think this flow chart's very helpful. I think I would put the determination or a recommendation on how we're going to evaluate biofuels as like not important, but it's like it's the critical path. I would draw another line between establishing and revising the emissions to the pacing process. I want the subgroup work I'll roll with the subgroup work, but I don't see how the pacing group makes much progress unless they know what they're counting. And then if that's the critical path, this schedule is really challenging. We haven't really even started the discussion.
In the pacing group.
In the biomass group, I'm not in the pacing group. I was, then I was moved, and then
We
I
can
was
move you back.
moved back while I was away, and then I got moved back. So no, I'll leave it at that. I want to see how much progress people make today, but that evaluation is critical, and it's really complex, and there's not one answer. You know, there's dozens of answers depending upon what study you look at.
Mhm.
Probably hundreds of answers, certainly hundreds of answers by fuel feedstock pathway if you look at just looking at the California program. So, this is, beyond non-trivial.
Yeah, I think some of the inspiration for putting the pacing process up front is because even at the workshop, there was a lot of discussion on what even the baseline, where to start, like what the baseline reference year is, for instance. So that even without looking at really specific numbers on trajectory and all of that, it's just like inputs. There was a disagreement on inputs. And so that was, I think, some of the motivation for trying to iron that out first and understand if there's even agreement on the information that goes into understanding how to draw the curve, from whenever implementation date to 2030 and 2050. But again, I appreciate that all these things separated out are very difficult. It's all very interrelated.
Yes, it's all very interrelated, and also, you make a great point. What's going to be the start? What's the baseline year? And then, what the determination of how to align the life cycle reductions with the inventory reductions, that's still undetermined. There's two groups of thoughts on that. There's we need a measure mix, which that's not coming right away to be able to make that determination. I saw some public comment, I think it was from Mr. Weiss, about another approach where you make a lot of assumptions about that. I'm a proponent of the first approach, but that's that's going to take a lot of time. The second approach, I understand it, but it makes a lot of assumptions, and to the extent that it does that, you may not be accomplishing this at the least cost, and that's a problem. So,
So Brian, one of the things of this conversation was sort of kicked off by a discussion about what additional breakout groups we might need. I don't know if what you're raising goes to perhaps a suggestion that we need a separate group to look at something, but just want to bring it back rather than us debating this in this moment. I think that is something that's going to have to go through the bioenergy, but just curious if you think that the complexity that you're raising, would warrant an additional breakout group.
No, I think these tasks are sequential and not parallel, but there's not the time frame to accomplish and come to agreement on all these, because they aren't just, to me, cut and dried technical issues, is extremely challenging. But no, I don't think an extra group helps. And again, I don't think having the pacing group, I want to see what kind of progress they think they can make, but that's ultimately informed by how we're going to score all this stuff, I think. But I want to hear from Matt. I'm done talking.
Matt, let's let you in there.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to hear from me, Brian. I apologize. I don't think this belongs for a breakout group, but I'm worried about when we get to other matters, and I can take this offline as well, but I just want to be fully transparent about the concern that I have on behalf of the obligated entities and the urgency of which we are going to make a request for the PUC. And I just want to state it on the record. I don't think there should be a breakout group. unless you think there should be, but I'm going to bring it up now rather than at the end of the meeting, which is the obligated entities need ASAP a determination from either the TAG or the PUC, or a recommendation from the TAG, or a statement from the PUC that says quite clearly when the obligated period the first obligated period begins. Is it a calendar year? We think so. Is it the year 2025? We think so. And then when the first payment in lieu of credits would occur based on what time frame of gallons sold. Why is this important now? Because next week, fuel sellers will begin selling guaranteed price programs. And if they are to obey Vermont's law, which they will, they are required to purchase those gallons within 7 days of selling them, and need to be able to guarantee those contracts. There's obviously an opportunity there for the 50 or so companies that didn't bother to register to sell that product and without counting for it. We want to make sure that all companies are registered, and we want to make sure that we know for sure which year those gallons will be obligated should this become law. So if the answer is, Matt, it's 2024 gallons, well, that time has already passed. If the answer is it's 2025 gallons, okay, let's say that on the record. If the answer is no, Matt, it's 2026 gallons, we need to know that as well, because they will start selling. Remember, there's 200 million gallons of heating oil and propane, 100 million of each. They will start selling those gallons next week for delivery in January of 2025. And many of them, and that's an important tool for consumers to lock in their price, have guaranteed rates. And many fuel dealers are concerned that if they do that, they'll be obligated to sell gallons. And if there's a fee attached to it, it will be larger than their gross margin, and then they'll just have to stop selling. So we're going to ask a legal opinion from the PUC. I just want to impress upon you the importance of us, the urgency of finding out that answer.
So you said it's not another group. Where do you see that analysis and recommendation coming from?
You know, I just stole time out of the agenda because I didn't want it to be at 12:29 when I brought that up. And I didn't want anyone of this group to be confused or surprised when they see that filing later this week.
So you, in fact, could be asking, I mean, are you asking the TAG to take some time today to have that discussion and make a recommendation?
If it is crystal clear in anyone's mind what the obligated period is, and I'd love to hear it. But if people are just as, if it's uncertain in people's minds, I would accept that too, because I think ultimately it's the PUC that makes that call.
Ultimately it is, you're right. Ken, do you have a thought?
Yeah, actually, this to me does lead to a breakout group, but it raises also a huge question back to the commission whether the technical advisory group should be doing this. And what this is in my case is really running through the sequence of activities that an implemented clean heat standard represents. And Matt talked about the beginning of obligation. I guess early I thought we might be able to do 2025. I've since been convinced there's no way on God's green earth. The obligation can't start until 2026, but it is the obligation is based upon the sales in 2025. But to get to Matt's point, it doesn't mean that the obligated parties need to charge in 2025 because they don't actually have to have credits until 2026. Granted, next year they're going to have to understand their pricing so that they'll know how many credits, know what the cost of those credits are for 2026. But I'm raising this because I think Matt raised a good question. We don't know, and I fascinated in my own mind about, okay, what would this sequence looks like? Because we just talked about earlier about the possibility that the registration doesn't take place until July 1st, 2026. reflecting the 2025 sales. Those 2025 sales are how the obligated parties are allocated their credits, their credit obligation. Well, they're halfway through the year. So to me, it would be an interesting breakout group, but whether it's a technical advisory group or, you know, I think, right, it's going to raise so many questions about timing, about establishing credit costs, about the default delivery agent understanding how many credits it is responsible for managing, for, you know, having available for obligated parties. There's so much there. And it would be a fascinating exercise to run through. But again, whether we're the right group to do that, because it's not just technical. I mean, it's the whole shooting match of all of these steps. Yeah, I'd love to see that happen.
So Emily's weighing in chat saying that she thinks it would be worth some time in the meeting today to discuss it. And Brian's saying, you know, in addition to knowing when obligation is incurred, you also want to know about early action credits, right? Sort of directed at you, Matt.
Early action credits are important, but think of the hundreds of fuel dealers that are going into the marketplace right now to lock in the most favorable rates for their customers for next winter. The calls that I get are not about what do I do with these invoices that I have in a basket from 2023. The calls are, can I still be a going concern? Will I still be able to turn on the lights and pay my employees if I am going to be charged retroactively for a gallon that I sell today that I deliver in January? And to that, I say, I don't know.
So I guess what I'm struggling with is it's identified. I hear from a number of you, this is an important question to answer, or at least to grapple with and decide whether it is up to the tag. We have an opening for a third group today if folks wanted to, and I know that sort of splits you between groups you're in already. So I don't know if that's the right approach, or we want to take time out of the agenda and take it away from the breakout groups. So I'm sort of offering both those options up to you, Rick, and if others have.
Yeah, well, my reaction immediately is that I share the concern, the urgency that Matt is expressing. We have we still have 10 minutes. We're ahead of schedule. We have 10 minutes right now that we can use to further this discussion, and if we can hone some kind of statement that can be taken to the PUC on how we feel about it. Is there something that we want to say? We've just heard Matt say that he's not sure when the obligations begin, and Ken has said that he doesn't see how they could begin before 2026. But now the question of the registry timing, you know, seems to upend some of that. Is there something that we think we want to say? I just saw, Matt, you were.
Well, let me go off script for a second, and no one has to agree with me here, but I would say this: it is my interpretation that there's certain things that the PUC must do in accordance with Act 18. However, and we know this is going to get into a political realm next year when it'll have to be voted up or down inside into law or veto. But I think it's reasonable, this is my opinion, but I think it's reasonable that if the tag sees a pathway for this to occur, for the Clean Heat Standard to actually occur and be implemented, which involves not only a rule, but a legislative fix, I think it's within our purview to suggest that to the PUC. Now, some may disagree with it. Some may say, nope, the legislature created the law, the PUC must follow the law, and that is that. But as we go down this pathway, I think this and other things will come before us and we'll say, we've already seen that with 305, the bill that's in the Senate, that's in the House that passed out of the Senate, which is there's no way that we can pick a default delivery agent on June 2024. Let's move that back. So I think there is going to be a laundry list of things that need to change in the statute for the clean heat standard to actually work. And if we just follow the law as written, as we're intended to do, I don't see this passing. I don't see this working. Just my opinion.
Other thoughts? Well, I'll just say, Matt, Matt, if that's the case, I'm not sure that we'll be able in the next 10 minutes or even in the next 2 hours, figure out what we want to say to solve the problem that you're facing in the next 7 days. So you're gonna, you on behalf of your constituency are going to file this week or at some point.
Yes, I'm sorry I stole your time. I just
No.
want to make sure that people knew that there's not, I'm just being straightforward, that's all.
No, we've got the time. This is important. I'll sit here and say, I'm not sure just how we ought to proceed on it. But it sounds like at the very least, there's an opportunity for us to discuss whether this is something we should weigh in on and how we should weigh in on it. And that, I think that becomes immediately an agenda question for the coming meetings. Any other thoughts?
Deirdre has her hand up.
Deirdre. Yeah, Deirdre.
So I'm just speaking for myself here, not the commission, and just my own curiosity. Wouldn't you need more than just the implementation and year-end fuel sales year to inform fuel dealers what to do in the upcoming weeks? Like, you would need credit prices, you would need credit obligations, which I don't see can come until much later on. I guess I want to agree that this is critical, but I just don't see how those two pieces are possible in the short term.
Yeah, you nailed it. You're absolutely right, Deirdre. However, we understand, we're not going to ask for all those things to come together. But if we were given a positive determination by the PUC that the credit obligation doesn't actually start until the calendar flips to year 2026, that would change the buying practices for over 200 million gallons that are going to occur over the next 6 months. So it's kind of important to us.
That's helpful. Thank you.
We've got 5
Any
more
other-
minutes. I think the big question is whether, and I think first, whether the tag has the time and would be timely enough for what Matt is raising as an urgent issue, urgent question that needs to be resolved, to weigh in to the PUC.
And just to be clear, this is a first-year problem. If we have a 3-year budget, the default delivery agent, we know the cost of credits, or we have a ceiling price or a price, then budget accordingly. This is a first-year problem. And it's going to be a first-year problem in 2026 as well. But if it's a 2026 problem, we want to know that. Or if it's a 2025 problem, we want to know that.
Ken, back to you.
Yeah, I guess as a member of the technical advisory group that's had some time now to review various pieces of the legislation and the inputs to make the rules, I do think that as a member of the TAG, I'd be very comfortable communicating to the Public Utility Commission that the first year of obligation cannot be until 2026. It is so hard to envision all of those, the credit prices, credit obligations. We don't have a default delivery agent. For 2025 to be an obligation year, it is, I'll say, very, very difficult. I don't want to say impossible, but I think we have been reviewing this perhaps more than any other group. Therefore, I do think we can send a message to the Public Utility Commission that the obligation year at its earliest, the obligation period at its earliest could be January 1st, 2026. From our understanding of the scheduling, all the tasks necessary, I think I'd be comfortable doing that. Maybe not everybody, but I raise it to the group. Would we as a full group want to communicate that, yes, the obligation period cannot be until January 1st, 2026?
So Ken, can I ask you to put that in the form of a motion, then we'll continue discussion? And then if we, after that discussion, we could take a vote and decide how other people are feeling about that?
Sure. So
Yeah,
I
before you
move
do
that
so,
the.
well, wait, Ken, and I agree, Captain, we should do that, but let's just give Luce a chance to speak, because she had her hand up before the idea of a motion came up. I just wanted to hear from her.
Sure. Yeah, it's fine to have a discussion. I was agreeing with what Ken was saying, that's all, because I feel there's too many unknowns. Otherwise, if I was a dealer, I'd add, I don't know, 20% to the cost and just guess on what it's going to cost me. It just seems like there's too many unknowns to make this decision for 2025. That's all I'm going to say.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, Ken, sorry.
I'm going to be typing this into the chat for everybody to see as you articulate the motion.
Yeah, so I'll start with my hesitation as to whether we should reference Matt's group's request, but so I'm going to leave that out and just say that the technical advisory group would like to send a recommendation to the Public Utility Commission that the date of first obligation cannot be before January 1st, 2026, after reviewing all of the activities that are necessary for the clean heat standard to be implemented in such a way that provides obligated parties and the default delivery agent what they need to have a functioning system.
Second.
Too fast.
Yeah.
I can't say it again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your qualifying statement, your relative clause needs to go earlier in the sentence, but yes.
TAG would like to send a recommendation to the PUC that the date of first obligation, it cannot be before January 2026, and then you had a very long qualification.
Yeah, so we put a period at the end of that. The reason for this recommendation is after review of all the tasks necessary to implement the clean heat standard, that we will not be able to accomplish those tasks in a timely manner that would allow for any obligation period prior to January 1st, 2026.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Friendly amendment, we believe we would not be able to. Is that okay?
I'm not a believer.
You're sure?
It's fine.
All right. There it is.
Okay. I gotta find my.
The TAG would like to send a recommendation to the PUC that the date of first obligation cannot be before January 2026. After review of tasks necessary to implement the clean heat standard, we cannot complete the tasks that would allow obligation prior to January 2026. And Rick, how strongly do you feel about I believe?
Well, I would say I hate to be, absolutely sure. I just say we feel that we cannot
Okay.
complete the tasks.
I will.
That's all, just recognizing that.
And Luce.
Just a quick question, and sorry, I haven't kept up with all the calendar schedule revisions. Is PUC allowed to change that? Is that deadline in the act at this time? No. Okay, thank you.
Brian? We're open for, this is discussion now.
Yes, this is discussion, so I posted from the act what the final rule schedule is in the chat. On or before January 15, 2025, they'll submit the rules to the assembly. Rulemaking takes at least 6 months. So I don't see that I don't think we're having a discussion about whether or not this can start on January 1, 2025. It's not, the act says, doesn't even require that.
So you don't think it's a significant threat, but it still feels like there's some, clearly, others feel like there's some uncertainty.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
I
not
would-
saying there's certainty. I'm just saying that I think January 1, 2025 is not on the table.
I would disagree with that, Brian, because we are collecting gallons. The PUC is collecting gallons as of 2023. The rule could be written in order to obligate the gallons sold in 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026. There is nothing that says it has to be January 1, 2026.
And Matthew, you've added additional language from the act. You want to clarify?
Sure, it essentially reflects what Matt just said, that the proposed rule will have obligations in it. And I'll just say that maybe, and this is me speculating, the commission would modify the first rule to be prorated based on the subsequent heating season to give lead time, or simply grant a good cause adjustment to the entire category for the startup year. And then I'll also say before we vote on the motion that I'm going to abstain from it, just as the sitting member for DPS. I wouldn't want to make this vote on TJ's behalf without discussing it with him.
Understand. Yeah, thank you. Emily?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm of agreement with the folks saying that we just don't think it's feasible to do this in 2025. And I guess wanted to share, in case anyone's not kind of in Vermont, I will note that I am starting to see from like my non-energy nerd friends on Facebook that are getting mailers from their fuel dealers saying that this is going to go into effect on January 1st, 2025. And, you know, providing very high prices for what it's going to cost in 2025 as they're planning ahead for the next heating season. And that is a concern to me as well. Like, I think even if we think we could feasibly do this, which I think we probably can't, there is a real risk if we do this prematurely of people making, you know, sharing information that's not based on the best data. Like, we don't actually have information on how much this is really going to cost at this point. So I just think there's a real risk if things were to move forward quickly. And I think we would alleviate a lot of potential kind of concerns that are swirling in the community by just clearly stating that this isn't going to take effect until 2026.
Thanks. I'll just say that, you know, Brian's point about, you know, the rule not being able to go into effect until sometime next year is a powerful one. It's unlikely that the PUC would adopt a rule, or the legislature would approve it, that has retroactive effects. That said, the motion under consideration, I think, still would be helpful for clarifying this times, you know, this time sequence.
So Brian and yeah, I think that's it for now. Brian?
Yeah, I hear that. I don't object to this, but I think you're on target, Rick. This is, you know, not a tag issue. This is a PUC policy issue when it starts. But I'm happy to have folks weigh in on this, you know, similar to Matt, you know, just because of ANR doesn't really have a strong position on this. I'm going to abstain from this vote.
So I just want to note on process point, we were striving to not, you know, have votes in real time on motions that are introduced without, you know, folks having a chance to really consider it. It feels like I'm hearing a pretty strong consensus around this motion right now. So I do think it's probably worthwhile taking a vote and seeing how many people are comfortable advancing this. So Rick, I'll let you do the formalities.
Well, okay, then, if there's no further discussion, I'll ask everyone who is in favor of the motion to raise her or his hand. And we want to count them this time. I want to keep them up because
Yeah,
we're,
can we use virtual hands? It's so much easier for us
I
to-
agree.
to be able to see what the count really is. So if you could use your virtual hands, it's under reactions. If it's not, there
Right,
you.
'cause we may not even have given, there might be too many abstentions for this. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay.
wanna confirm
8.
we're voting for ayes at this moment, right?
Ayes, this is ayes, and I count 8 at the, well, I
In
did
favor.
8 in favor of that. Okay. All opposed?
All hands down.
All hands down. Yes, yes, thank you. All opposed?
Your hand down, Floyd. He's trying. He's trying.
All opposed, please raise their hand. Their hands. And I will ask for abstentions, just, there are at least 2, I believe. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I see,
Floyd, you're not abstaining, Floyd, right? Okay. you
I
just-
see 4 abstentions.
Sorry, I'm having problems with my emojis here.
Operator malfunction.
I'm having emotional problems here.
Okay, I see 3 abstentions then. By my count, that the ayes have it. So that's a recommendation that will forward to the PUC through the minutes. I think we'll do the job.
Is that right, Deirdre? Is that the best way to do that? I think it's pretty urgent. I don't know if that's. Can
Oh.
we?
Well, how else would we do it? You want us to write up something and,
I would, yeah, I don't know if it's a statement that Deirdre can then deliver to the PUC on our behalf. It would just be the statement of the motion with maybe a, an explanation that the tag discussed this issue and moved and approved the motion that blah. How,
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's, I'll certainly pass it along. I don't know that the commission will, what the reaction or formality of it will be, but, certainly pass it along.
Okay.
I can draft that language, just the transmittal language around that and get that to you at the end of the day.
right,
All right. My takeaway from this discussion is that we don't have a recommendation for any additional breakout groups. That the bioenergy group has a lot on their plate, and that there is, there's definitely interconnections between what the pacing group is trying to resolve as well. But that our standing groups right now are adequate for us to try to address some of these tasks as laid out on the flow chart. If that's okay, then I would say we need to move to our report from our equity advisory group liaisons. I'll turn it over to you, Emily Roscoe, and Matt.
Thanks, Catherine. So we had 2 major discussion points in the EAG this week. One was discussing the equity framework, and that is getting into its final form, and excuse me, will also be shared with the TAG and the PUC for their use in decision making. So that is coming. And then the EAG also discussed the credit ownership working group within the EAG, and moved to send the PUC a few recommendations regarding the straw proposal. And continued discussion will be had in the next meeting regarding delivered fuels or delivered measures. And then just noting that I've shared with Catherine, Rick, and Deirdre information on Efficiency Vermont's income verification methodology. So If you have any questions or responses, I'm happy to take those back to the Equity Advisory Group or to Efficiency Vermont. Matt, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, that was a great description. I would just add some little color to the, or some further infill to the credit ownership discussion. I think it was, there's some overlap into what the EAG group is talking about, the TAG is talking about, and where I sort of see the overlap, I go, okay, that seems to be the path. And when it comes to when it comes to installed measures, I think there is agreement that it starts with the individual making the investment and then it flows upstream to the obligated parties. And I think the desire from what I heard is that ensures that there's a smooth pathway from a person or individual who makes the investment in their home to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from a installed measure, such as a heat pump or a modern wood stove. But that there also be recognition that there needs to be a way to turn that credit or that decision into something of monetary value, which implies that we need a system for getting it from the homeowner level to the installer or to the incentivizer and then to the obligated parties. And we don't see that path yet, but I think that's something that we all are working on together. And then delivered fuels, in many ways it's easier, but in some ways it's more complicated. But we haven't made a ruling on. We decided to hold that conversation for another day.
And I would just add that, the focus seemed to be memo on credit ownership is transparency in, that making sure that is clear that where the ownership lies. And so they're on the equity side, they want to make sure that all consumers have the information they need to make the decisions correctly. So that was a bit of the emphasis too. So I'm assuming they're going to share that with us, right? We haven't gotten it yet, but along with the principles will be shared, and then they're continuing their discussion on credit ownership. I only know this because I was filling in as a facilitator, so just adding that.
I would only add that we'll be sending around Emily's the documents that Emily Roscoe referred to. We'll be sending them around to the TAG. Yeah.
Emily, can I ask for clarification? Is there additional information that will still be forthcoming around the questions that the TAG posed to the EAG?
Are you asking about low and moderate income definitions and income verification?
Yeah.
So I think, as Matt pointed out in the last meeting, we're still talking about this topic and we're just getting into it. So I think this was our initial response, was providing these resources on EVT's programs and verification methodology. But I think there's more to come, long story short. And then also just noting that Dominic had combined all of the program information for low and moderate income programs, and that will be shared as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a break now. We're about exactly on time. So ask folks to come back at 10:45. We have 2 breakout groups. We'll convene for hopefully a full hour and maybe a little extra since we don't have 3 group report outs. So please come back into the main room at 10:45 and then we will allow you to join your preferred breakout group. Those in the pacing group that is not meeting today are certainly invited to go to any of the other groups for today, and the public as well can choose whichever group they'd like to go to. Hopefully that will go more smoothly this time. All right, so off video for 8 or 9 minutes and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you very much.
Luce, it looks like it's just you and me for the rest of the meeting. There you go. We got it, Rick.
Perfect. Well, we'll get a lot done with two people making decisions, right?
Oh, getting people back after a break is always tough. There you go. So all please rejoin. Matt and Ken, where's Ken? I made you co-host, which allows you to record. So do remember to record. I forgot to pause during our break. So I want you to hit the record button as soon as your breakout group starts. It should download to your computer. Do you have a question, Matt?
I was confused by, I can transmit it using WeTransfer, but I was confused. Is there a repository for either video or stuff that I've received on credit ownership that can be shared? I'm sure you went over this and I just blanked on it.
So you mean like a place where you can share files for your group?
Well, I've received comments and I think I volunteered. I'm pretty sure I volunteered to receive comments, put it on one sheet and then share it. And I wasn't sure what the best mechanism for doing that. And similarly the video.
Yeah, you can share it with Deirdre and she will make sure it's posted as a document for this meeting.
Okay.
That's the best thing. And then of course you can send it by email to your group of tag members in your group. And you can share screen within your breakout group too, if you want to do that.
Yeah, I guess I just mean for something that lives beyond the meeting.
Yeah, I think it should be posted to the website for the meeting materials.
Right.
Okay, but I don't do that. I don't.
No, you have to send it to Deirdre to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and anything that both groups, so today's just two groups, want memorialized in the minutes, just send me, a few bullets of here's the progress we made, these are the next steps. So that can be the full group kind of understanding of what the group accomplished.
And Matt, I'll take those notes for the credit ownership group.
Okay, and then the comments that I've received, do you prefer a PDF file? Is that the simplest thing, or?
Yeah, is that for next meetings, just to kind of compile?
Yeah, I've received comments about credit ownership in written form. And I think I agreed to collate those and then distribute somehow. So I was just gonna make them to PDFs and email them to you unless you do it differently.
No, that works. If I see it and I think it's something else, I'll let you know, but that sounds good.
Emily, you had a question before we send everyone to breakouts?
Real quick, Dave Westman's going to be closer to 11. If people join a little bit later, is there a way for them to get to the breakout group?
I think I will be notified. I'm going to go to the bioenergy, but I should be notified and then I can come back and assign them or let them in.
Thank you. And Matt, just a heads up, Dave will be joining just a little late.
Okay, great. All right. Now I think we've got this set. I'm going to open the rooms. What we did learn is that for you to see what room you want to join, you may need to go into first of all, you need to be in not all full screen view. So you need to get out of full screen view. There's a view option at the top of your screen so that you can exit full screen if that's what you're using now. When you do that, at the bottom of your screen, you're going to get a button that says more, and it'll be 3 dots. And that's where the breakout rooms will, oh shit.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
It hasn't me assigning you again. We just tested it. It worked fine. I don't know, every time okay. Unfortunately, it looks like anybody see it? Can anybody see the join room function?
Yeah, it's under, for me, on a Mac. It's under going more, and it's the last one below polls and quizzes, breakout rooms. And I see bioenergy and credit ownership, and I'm going to choose credit ownership and click join and say goodbye.
But I think the rest of the folks cannot see it because, can you?
We're able to see it.
I can see
People are
it.
moving. It looks like people are moving, so some people are seeing it.
Good. All right.
Right.
It has me assigned too, so I was very worried. All right, everybody jump into the room you want. Oh, thank goodness.
How do I assign myself?
You
I-
should have a join. If
I
you
have
can,
an assign, but where's my join?
I can assign you, I think. It's probably because you're a co-host. Where are you?
Oh, I see the join is at the very top. All right, I'll go to bioenergy. Thanks, Catherine.
And if they don't start recording, remind them. All right, is everybody in a room? How about you, Casey? John McCormick, did you get into a room? Do you need any help? John McCormick, how are you doing? Do you need help getting into a room? Are you opting out?
Welcome back.
Floyd, I think we caught you right at consideration of.
We'll give him another chance when I finish
Yeah.
my summary. We'll again, I won't be able to cover everything, so maybe he can complete that thought at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
Are we were all ruthlessly evicted from our breakouts. But no.
I gave you 2 warnings, I'm just saying.
Oh, well, you know, I didn't see them. If others, it was, I never saw the warning. But we were keeping an eye on the clock.
So we do have a little more time this time for the reports from both of these groups. And happy to take a volunteer to go first, but very interested in hearing sort of key topics that you discussed and any action items or decisions you made.
I'll start while it still is fresh on my mind. Sorry to the others. So the bioenergy topic, as was noted prior to our breaking out, is really big. And I had circulated some materials, some examples from California and Oregon with regards to carbon intensity. The preliminary results, the draft results of ANR's work on upstream analysis. So our first discussion, and I think this is kind of a conclusion that we came to that we want to communicate to the full tag, is that the bioenergy group is going to focus its assessments using life cycle analysis. And for fossil fuels, while it's not our piece, I want to be clear because the clarity just came to me fairly recently. Life cycle analysis of the carbon emissions is the sum of the combustion, which takes place at the point of combustion, the carbon emissions from that, plus the upstream values that were the product of the ANR report. That gives you, for the fossil fuels, a life cycle carbon emissions. For the bioenergy topic, it's a little more complicated, but still we want to adhere to the same approach. But bioenergy is balanced by carbon uptake. And again, we used examples from California and Oregon that run through many different fuel pathways. The source of the feedstock, how that feedstock is processed, how the products are transported. And in each of those cases, they come up with a carbon intensity value. And it's that process that Vermont, I think we agree, Vermont is going to need to do as well. Unlike California and Oregon, or California in particular, where there are literally hundreds of fuel pathways, we can't do that analysis. So one of the latter topics that we addressed is we hope that the consultant can help us, the term that some of our folks use is materiality, that to help us recognize where some of the bigger bang for the buck in terms of bioenergy pathways exist, so that we can focus on doing analysis, we being directing the consultants, but can focus the analysis so we have stronger carbon intensity value numbers for the types of fuel pathways that have the best opportunity for reducing carbon emissions. And fortunately, we're going to be getting some early information. The PUC consultant will be developing a measure list fairly soon. And that measure list will help tee up this discussion of where are some of the bioenergy pathways that may have the greatest opportunity and greatest potential. So there should be some review there. You know, again, the discussion itself was very useful because we are going to have kind of rehash many of these topics to understand the role of bioenergy and what happens in terms of where there's agricultural feedstocks that lead to the development of a fuel. How does that get addressed? Again, fortunately, there are models in place that help us do that, and somewhat different because there's not as many examples as wood. And again, we want to use kind of the same approach and say, okay, can we better understand the different types of wood fuel pathways? And while there may not be as robust, there still are some examples out there for how to consider those fuel pathways for wood that lead us to a carbon intensity value that then will feed into a still undefined set of wood combustion clean heat measures. We know that there's the term in the statute, which is advanced wood heat, but there may not be as clear and sharp a definition of what advanced heat should include for clean heat measures. Again, this is a topic we're going to have to continue to address. So I now invite my fellow participants to help me fill in some of the pieces that I may have glossed over a little bit. Floyd.
Thanks, Ken. So as I was being evicted out of the room and my belongings were thrown out on the lawn there, what I was saying was I agree with the materiality. I agree with the materiality concept that I think Patrick suggested. I would add an additional consideration to that, or a sub-layer to that. Materiality is kind of a moving the needle sort of concept, and it's all about kind of the area under the curve, how much total reductions you would get of one measure versus another. I would suggest an additional consideration of how quickly you can get a substantial amount of reductions. I mean, after all, I think we're all interested in getting the most amount of carbon reductions as quickly as possible. I mean, that's how we address climate change after all, right? And so kind of a time value of carbon consideration, or how much you can get out of the atmosphere or keep from reaching the atmosphere in as short a time as possible, I think is an important consideration, given that carbon, once it's released into the atmosphere, lasts for hundreds of years, and you really want to avoid introducing new carbon as quickly as possible. So, you know, not just a, area under the curve consideration, but a kind of a peak area, if you will. So I'll leave it at that.
Matthew, you want to add in?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said towards the end of the meeting. That's not directly applicable to fuels, but it is applicable to measure credits for avoided emissions. And that's that I think this group should provide a recommendation to the Public Utility Commission as it consults with them on what the values of measures actually are and the values of credits for avoided carbon. A methodology for accounting for the grid carbon intensity for electrification measures, because currently the state has more than one way of accounting for that. One way is to account for it by looking at the regional mix from ISO New England. That's what we're proposing to use as the basis for the modeling for the potential study. and that's a regional average value. The other way is to look at the state's portfolio value, which takes into account renewable energy credit retirements, and therefore contractually and on paper reduces the carbon intensity of the electricity consumed in the state. So there's a pretty big difference. It's an order of magnitude. It's almost a 10x or maybe greater than a 10x difference. And the policy decision that goes into making that determination of regional value versus portfolio value is going to completely change any hypothetical measure mix that we have. It'll change the balance between biofuels and electrification. So it'll be crucial to the outcome. But if the group could come together on a particular position and justification for that position, I think that would be very helpful to the PUC. And ideally, if it's the same position as the potential study is taking, that it's the regional value, then we'll have, you know, outcomes that are in harmony with each other, instead of potentially having opinion dynamics, the PUC's contractor use a different value and having significant disagreement in the projections.
So Matthew, is it fair to say that that topic should be addressed by the full tag, right?
Yes.
So can we ask you to tee that up for us when you can?
Sure. We could try to put it on an agenda coming up soon, maybe in the next meeting or the meeting thereafter.
Yeah, that sounds sensible.
Can we shift to the credit ownership group and hear their report?
Credit ownership had a very robust discussion. We looked at the questions proposed by the department in the straw proposal, recognizing that when it comes to ownership of delivered fuels, we're really talking about two different buckets. One is those distributed by a regulated utility, such as Vermont Gas Systems, when they distribute renewable natural gas, and those that are distributed by the hundreds of different unregulated deliverable fuel products, propane, heating oil, kerosene, and their efforts to sell a product that reduces greenhouse gases emissions, and how those need to be treated slightly differently, and then also how those are treated differently than the delivered the installed products, which could include modern wood stoves or cold climate heat pumps or heat pump water heaters, or insulation or weatherization services, and how those are really, there's different buckets for those too. Those that are provided where the funding is provided entirely by the low-income weatherization program, which of course is funded by the fuel tax on heating oil and propane, and those that are acquired through the Tier 3 program, which are incentivized by the electric utilities, and then those of which are on their own. And what we learned is that when it comes to credits for individuals that aren't part of weatherization, that aren't part of the Tier 3 program, the rebate that they receive from Efficiency Vermont, that Efficiency Vermont claims currently ownership of all environmental attributes for that. So I, as an installer of that equipment, or I, as someone who installs that piece of equipment in my home, I give up under the existing rebate program that is approved by the PUC all rights to the environmental attributes of that. And someone from Efficiency Vermont suggested that that should continue to exist for this yet to be designed program, in which the installer would in fact give up all rights to that environmental attribute or forego a rebate that would provide a discount to their customer.
Yeah, let me just add, it's not only Tier 3, but it also includes just the straight EVT programs as well, that question. And Matt, if I just will add that the discussion's going to continue, and we're going to start working with a document, formulating the issues and the approaches, and see if we can't narrow areas of difference. Ken.
So did the topic of economics arise during this, that if those credits are owned by Efficiency Vermont and the electric distribution utilities, that perhaps those creditable activities do not require additional incentive payments, and therefore those credits could be transferred? I mean, I don't know if my material got circulated, but those credits could be circulated, credits could be put into the mix and essentially not cost anything, reducing the overall credit cost.
So Ken, I did bring that up, and I apologize for not circulating your memo wildly, but it had been read by a number of different people on the call, so we did comment on it. And I suggested that your comments trying to avoid the double payment, the double counting that might exist should the utilities receive a cash benefit for something that they've already done and been received a benefit from a different program. And also whether it's looking backwards or going forward, my other concern was that, what does this have to do? What will it do to the marketplace in terms of installers and obligated parties making a capital investment if they can get affordable credits? And we did have a comment from someone representing Efficiency Vermont saying that they opposed the idea of allowing these credits to be uncompensated, and suggested that no, in fact, they would oppose any effort to allow those tier 3 credits to go into the marketplace without some remuneration.
Right. And so Ken, it's still a matter for robust discussion.
Okay. So want to turn it now to public comment. And I can tell from the number of comments in the chat, both during the subgroup breakouts, that there are going to be quite a few. So I'm going to ask that each individual who has a public comment to raise your hand, and then I'll allow, we'll just start out with a minute for each individual. And if we have more time left, I'll certainly circle back if you have more to say. But that will allow us to have as many people speak as possible. Also, just a note, Ken, you mentioned a number of documents that you have circulated, I guess, to your group. Would love those to be accessible to everybody, including the public. So
they will be, Catherine. We
need those posted. The public has been asking for access to those.
Yeah. No, they'll be posted.
So Nick, your hand was up first, and I'll give you the floor for a minute.
Yes, our ability as members of the public to participate was severely impaired by our not getting those written materials that were circulated. A couple of us asked in the chat that they be provided, and no one responded to the chat. Also, new members have been allowed to participate who aren't TAG members, specifically Adam Sherman. Our subcommittee already has several biofuels industry representatives. Adam comes from the Biomass Energy Resource Center, which VEIC acquired. It's a biomass industry advocacy group. The public's view is that the group is already overstacked with biofuel industry reps. Now it's even more stacked. And there was a member of the public who has significant expertise, Mary Wood. She's an internationally recognized expert on biomass energy, and her ability to participate was severely limited to just the chat. So we're really concerned that the public is not being permitted to participate, that the committee does not have significant expertise in modeling of life cycle emissions from biofuels, and that it's stacked heavily in favor of the biofuels industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. And yes, I did suggest at the beginning of the bioenergy group that the TAG members needed the opportunity to have their full discussion, and then if time allowed, the public would also be allowed in, and time ran out. Apologies for that. Mary?
Thanks, Nick, for way too flattering words about my expertise, but I have been working on this issue for many, many years. And I am concerned that there seems to be a big push within the committee to use things like the GREET model, which is just a completely inappropriate model to use for modeling net carbon emissions from woody biomass. And there doesn't seem to be, I mean, now to be fair, I've only spent an hour with these people and I just heard what they had to say, but I'm not sure that there is a true appreciation among the committee members of, you know, how bioenergy modeling is actually done for woody biomass. And it's important to get this right, because just defaulting to using things like the California, I heard a lot of talk about how, you know, we could just use the California approach and there's going to be a presentation on that. California is not getting it right either. The IPCC rules are explicit. The accounting rules, the reporting rules that the United States reports under internationally, that the accounting convention of counting bioenergy as zero in the energy sector is not a representation of physical reality. And yet that convention has been rolled into a lot of the bioenergy carbon accounting frameworks that are used for policies. And Massachusetts, as far as I know, is the only place that has attempted to grapple with the true life cycle impact of burning biomass. And it does concern me, no disrespect to Adam Sherman, but it does concern me to see Adam Sherman part of the committee and promoting a long discredited approach that I refer to it as the trees are growing somewhere approach, that, you know, as long as there's net growth on the landscape, we don't need to count biomass emissions because there's, you know, there's still some net increment of growth. It's not legitimate. It doesn't stack up underneath the IPCC approach. And it really is important to get this right, because what we are seeing internationally is a collapse of forests that are coming under bioenergy pressure. Now, I'm not saying that's happening in Vermont or even that it might happen, but Vermont tackling this needs to set a good example and really adopt a true science-based framework. And a rush to judgment and adopting approaches that have already been discredited is not the way to do that. So I hope that the process will be a little bit more transparent, that materials will be shared, and I hope that you know, that the committee is open to, you know, really advocating for truly science-based accounting. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Other comments from the public? Laura, you look like you want to say something, but you can't figure out how to unmute.
No, I know how to unmute. Thank you. Laura Hyde, I work with Mary at PFPI, and I invited her to join us for this meeting because we're getting into an area where I'm out of my depth and she's an expert, even though she won't let me call her an expert. What I'd wanted to find out more of was the consultant's report. I understand that's supposed to be finalized as of tomorrow, April 19th. And I'm just trying to figure out where is the role for the public in submitting comments. So, you know, Matthew Baker-Pole said that, you know, we're encouraged to engage, but that document hasn't been put out for public comment. So where are we with that process, and at what point, or will there be any where we can actually engage in these very important decisions?
When the document is made available by the PUC, any member of the public can respond to it by making a filing with the PUC.
Okay, so that's going to, but it's going to be finalized. So that's why I was questioning. It's not like it's a draft document that we can weigh in on. You're going to be, you've had the draft. It will be issued as a.
No, we haven't had anything. We don't have.
Okay.
Okay. So I think you're referring to the potential study assumptions memo on methodology and measure characterizations.
That's what I was looking for on my desk before I raised my hand. Yeah, the name of that.
Sure. The schedule has the contractor providing the department an internal version for review. That's been reviewed by the department and sent back to the contractor for some modification. They're going to provide a draft sometime next week. And there will be a 2-week period from the time of when the draft is presented to the public and to the tag for review,
Okay.
for feedback to come in and another iteration of the document to be produced. So there is an engagement window there. All of these windows are a little bit tight, like I acknowledge that. But it's not just going to be presented as some final decree.
Okay, thank you.
Sam Davis.
Hey there. I'm also at PFPI and I echo and support everything that Mary and Laura have said. I actually just have a process question being new to this situation. Will there be full written transcripts provided for those of us who have trouble hearing sometimes? I know you've been recording, but I'm wondering if there is an ability to have a full text transcript so that folks can go back, review, and fully understand what was said during the meeting, and then if they missed it, that they would have an opportunity to at least participate retroactively.
We have not been taking a transcript. We do have minutes of the meeting. And the other thing that you can do is during the meeting, you have the option for choosing captions for all the entire meeting. So you can see a captioned version of the conversation that's going on. And I should know better how that happens.
Yeah, you can't save those. So if you have auditory processing issues, it doesn't help that much. What I would recommend, and there are many services that can do it, but I know Descript is one thing that will do it retroactively from a recording. And they have substantial government and nonprofit discounts, so it should be no monetary cost or very little if the committee chooses to pursue accessibility. And then the other place, I believe, is otter.ai will do something similar. But providing transcripts could be a really powerful tool to actually have meaningful public engagement in this process.
Yes, and I think Zoom has its own AI transcripts built in. So I will take this up with the project team and see if that's doable.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion. Annette?
I just checked, and the YouTube version that does get posted does have the captions on it too. So that's another way of looking after the fact. And although YouTube captions can be kind of entertaining, they do provide a way to view it. As long as I'm talking, I might as well weigh in a little bit on this biomass issue, because I have followed the Climate Council's whole discussion on biomass, and I've followed, they had a biomass task group, and I attended those meetings, and am aware that this, as I believe has been said in other meetings, is a very contentious issue. And I agree with the comments that were made that this has not been a fair process, and one that I do see increasing pressures on Vermont's forests, and so I don't know how to fix it, except that I think that allowing someone like Mary Booth to actually be a part of the discussions of the subcommittee, especially if you're allowing someone who comes from an advocacy position to use a lot of wood, would be very welcome. And I gather that from other discussions here that there is the opportunity for anyone who is a member to bring in expertise. And so perhaps someone who is a member would invite Mary to participate in the next subcommittee meeting because that seems to be a way that this tag is set up to allow for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. And I think that's true that she could be brought in as an expert by one of the tag members. Rick, I think we're at the place we have no other hands to go to next steps.
Sure, and I will not take the time now. We're at the end of our time, but we'll have something to say at some point. We've already said it about just how the public engages in the tag process, as opposed to how the public engages in the PUC process. And there are important differences there. And I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning of the meeting. I do not consult the chat during these meetings. The chat provides a way of engaging, of interjecting comments into the discussion that would not be possible in a in-person meeting. And so as a consequence, I personally await only the the appointed times for people to chat rather than consult. I say for people to provide comment rather than follow the chat. I think the chat is actually inappropriate in this context. That said, having the chat to post links at times is helpful, of course. That said, other matters. We've gotten in this discussion a number of ideas for future topics for our next meeting. We will, when we sit down, when the leadership of the TAG sits down to put together the agenda next week, I'm sure we will make room for those. Matt, you've got your hand up. Is there something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I actually did want to pull one comment from the chat. John McCormick asked a question. Given the challenge the PUC faces to continue funding the proposed rulemaking process, will extending the first obligation to January 2026 add more pressure on the PUC's finding additional funds? Funding will not come from the sale of credits until 2026. So just so that was part of the engagement or the public comment, I wanted to read that aloud.
Thanks, Matthew. I don't offhand know the answer to that question. I suspect it won't be a problem, but I don't know exactly.
In terms of next meeting's agenda items, I know that the bioenergy subgroup did suggest that Floyd be invited to make a presentation to the full group. So that I think is one item that we want to consider. Are there other items that will have our standing report outs from PUC and the EAG, other items of topics that you want to see in addition to the breakout groups? Yeah, Matthew?
I'd just like to suggest EAG has started having meetings outside of the scheduled regular meeting of the EAG at large, and I think that's going to help them expedite their work products. I would like to make that recommendation for the TAG, especially for the carbon intensity subgroup. If we can find time, maybe we can solicit a doodle poll or something to figure out if people have other availability. That would be great.
Yep, that is certainly doable, and it would just be subject to open meeting laws. So we would want to be able to notice that, and that's what the EAG is doing. So and it's very simple. You just 2 days notice of the meeting and a very short agenda. So I think that's all it's required. But that has to be a decision of the group. So I would ask that the group sort of discuss and how you would want to proceed on that.
Well, at this moment, we're not going to proceed on that. We're at the end of our time, but we'll take it up as a matter to be addressed.
Yeah, we'll take it up at our next breakout in 2 weeks.
All right. Thanks all. I think that's all we have for today. And we will be working on the agenda for the next meeting over the course of this week. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.